I ran for council immediately after COVID, or right at the tail end of the pandemic, because housing is completely unaffordable. We saw housing prices shoot through the roof, and a lot of people just couldn't afford to live on the island. So that's why I ran and hope to try and make a difference there. The main things that I care about are environmental, climate change. We do have this looming climate catastrophe that has sort of like lost attention, but it's still vitally important. Our government needs to take this seriously. The rights of refugees and immigrants, wages are not high enough for many people. Many people work really hard and then they don't have enough to sort of make ends meet. Many people, even who are solidly middle class, live paycheck to paycheck. And housing is completely unaffordable. A family should be able to afford a home on an average wage. The Isle of Man is an incredible place to live, but I think that a lot of people find that they're forced to move away through a lack of economic diversity. If you really want to pursue a passion project, if there's a certain industry you want to be in, very hard to be on the Isle of Man if you aren't within a sort of finance or e-gaming sort of outlook. At the same time, housing prices are far too high. And if you can't afford a home here, you might as well be in a place like Manchester or London, where there's a greater variety of nightlife. There's a much higher variety of jobs and opportunities and work. And if you can't afford housing, then you don't really have a solid link or thing that roots you down into the community. There are a lot of young people who live on the Isle of Man, and there's a lot of people who love living on the Isle of Man. Particularly if you're outdoors, it is one of the best places in the world to live. If you want to go see something or hiking, you can. But at the same time, a lot of young people are leaving, and people are leaving because housing is completely unaffordable. Wages aren't particularly high. There is a very high cost of living. And there is an issue that when some young people leave, nightlife does get worse. Social connections do dry up. Dating gets a little bit harder, and it becomes much easier to move off island and move to a larger city like Manchester or London, where there are a lot more opportunities. I think that we need to try and keep more young people on the island for a range of reasons. So purely on economic terms, when you have a population that ages rapidly, you have people who require a lot more sort of state funding from NHS and pensions, and they need a lot more state support, and there's very few taxpayers to counter them. But on a more personal level, and the thing that I really deeply care about at the end of the day, is that it's hard to see friends leave. It's hard to see people that you know and care about leave the island and move somewhere else for greener pastures when the Isle of Man has so much to offer. And sometimes it does feel like you're in a losing battle to sort of convince people to sort of stay within their community. So yeah, I mean, there's a huge amount of talent that the Isle of Man produces that we grow and we nurture, and other places get to benefit from, and that is a bit heartbreaking at the end of the day. People do come back. So my two closest friends have moved back to the island after being away for a while. But I think one of the core issues is that when housing is unaffordable, it becomes very difficult to move back. And all small islands will always have a sort of tradition where young people go off and they go to a large city for quite a while and they come back in their 30s in order to raise kids. But if housing is unaffordable and there's nowhere for people to move back to, then that process of people coming back to raise kids just doesn't happen. So the island desperately needs to deal with its unaffordable housing. I've always really cared about housing. I mean, at times I've lived in insecure housing, but on a broader level, I think that you realize I try and deal with issues of folks living in poverty. And what you realize more often than not is issues of insecure housing entrench and lead to greater poverty. And no first world society should have people who struggle to make a living or struggle for somewhere to put their head or struggle for a dry, safe place to live. Fundamentally, as people, we all deserve that basic human right of shelter at the end of the day. And that's something that I've always been deeply passionate about. But I think that secondarily, that when you look at folks who do experience deep poverty, more often than not, it is driven by an inability to find housing. But a lack of housing affects people on all ends of the spectrum. So if you're middle class and you can't afford decent housing, you can't afford to buy a home, then you can't really start a family if you're living in an apartment that doesn't have enough space. If you already have a family and you want to grow your family, you can't do so because you can't afford to upsize. If you're an older person and you want to have a more manageable property, it's very difficult to downsize when housing prices are through the roof. So high housing prices only benefit a select number of people who own multiple properties, or folks who happen to be landlords. Don't begrudge anyone their success, but at the end of the day, it's hard not to feel resentful when half your income every month goes toward buying someone else a house, and you will never own one. The Isle of Man has a really, really high per capita income in terms of raw GDP numbers, twice as high as England. But does that mean that your average person is twice as rich as the average person in England? Absolutely not. Minimum wage is 1p higher, but cost of living is much higher, and housing costs are much higher than they are in many other towns of comparable size. And yeah, we are a tax haven for a lot of people, but I think what people don't always realize is that a class of really wealthy, rich people right on the top, they do require servers and cooks and cleaners and people who drive them around. So we do have a working class that isn't particularly wealthy, that has to deal with high housing costs, high cost of living, and sort of stagnating wages and a lack of economic diversity. And there are a lot of people who are doing absolutely amazingly. So inequality is really high. And inequality is something that really isn't factored into a lot of standard economic metrics. I don't believe that anyone ever viewed the Lord Street development as something that would change the fortunes of the Isle of Man in any way. Like, the Isle of Man is an incredible place to live in. This is a first world country. This is a place that has a lot of economic diversity. There are a lot of things to do. So I don't think that anyone ever viewed that as being the be all and end all that would really change or shape run our fortunes. At the end of the day, I think a lot of people would like to see a bus station return to that side. People might want to see housing on that side, or people just want to sort of see an eyesore in the heart of town sort of disappear and go away, and some development to finally happen in that one particular region. But there is a lot of development, there's a lot of growth, there's a lot of construction happening on the island. But yeah, no, that's been more of a local annoyance more than anything, rather than anything that was ever viewed as going to be sort of change our fortunes in a fundamental way. I think there are certain people who are quite frustrated by it. I know that on the council we're frustrated at the fact that the land hasn't really been developed. But I think at the end of the day, when someone has a claim that they're going to build a huge multi-story car park with 7 cinema screens and a bowling alley and this, that, and the next, I mean, I think people naturally have a bit of skepticism. I think people have a natural sort of like roll their eyes at the idea that there's going to be this huge, massive development. People do sell huge developments every so often, and do they come to fruition? Sometimes, not always. And I think that people naturally grow a bit wary of that over time. So yeah, the Isle of Man has loads going for it. I mean, this is one of the best places if you want to hike, if you want to go on a trail run, if you want to do outdoor biking or sea swimming. I couldn't imagine anywhere better. If you want to hang out outdoors or grab a drink with your friends, it's absolutely incredible. We have a thriving local music scene. Can't sell the Isle of Man highly enough. It's incredible to go down the road and bump into members of your community, your mates, your colleagues, and be able to chat and sort of know people around. It's really cool to go on a night out and then know most people out and about. Like, you've got this sense of community that I didn't have before I moved to the island, and I don't think I would have if I were to leave the island. So sort of rebuilding on that community is really something that I'm excited about. And I think there is nothing that the Isle of Man struggles with that can't be fixed by what the Isle of Man does really well. There's a bit of a misconception that our government is particularly large for the size of our island, but what tends to happen is more because we're a small economy, consolidation tends to happen. People who would otherwise be in private companies who would contract with the state in the UK end up working in companies or in entities that are owned by the state. So yes, the bus driver is a state-owned worker, but yeah, he works for Bus Vannin, which is which handles transport for a large part of the island. Our steam packet company or our flour mill are state-owned, so that these end up being state employees. So yeah, there are like a high percentage of people who work for the state, but in a small consolidated country that has to perform all of the exact same functions as England, with a much smaller apparatus, you are going to have a slightly higher proportion of people who work for the government, but in no way is the country sort of overburdened by the size of government. I think it's one of those that is easy to talk about, it's candid, but in general, our government does do a fairly good job of providing goods and services, and we do pay a lower rate of tax for a large extent than in order to fund those services. Our government does run our transport services. So whereas bus company might be privatized in the UK, it is state-owned over here. So our steam packet company that handles the main ferry that comes on and off the Isle of Man, that is a state-owned company. The flour mill is something that is owned by the state. Isle of Man Meats, which handles a lot of meat production, is owned by the state. Water and electricity production are handled by the state. A lot of recycling services are done by the state. So we've done a lot less in terms of privatizing our economy than the United Kingdom has, but we still retain a structure that is very similar economically to what you would see in England or Wales or Scotland. But I think the big difference is in the Isle of Man is that your government isn't an entity that sits miles above you. Rather, your MHK is probably going to be someone that you know, or you know someone who knows them. It's a guy who's going to be down in the local pub. It's someone who's embedded within the local community. We don't really have a political class that is hidden away from society and the general public as such. And when the government makes a bad decision, it's not some minister somewhere, oh, it's my uncle's brother's cousin, right? Like it's someone that you're likely to have some sort of interaction with. And most people have some sort of interaction with people within their communities and MHKs. I mean, 1 or 2 degrees of separation, right? I think it's brilliant to have a close relationship with your MHK. I think one of the concerns is that, like, when a decision seems a bit inscrutable or it doesn't make much sense, it's easy to sort of have animus towards someone in your community. Governments always have to make very difficult decisions. But at the end of the day, it's really nice to be able to know the person who sort of runs your healthcare. It's great to be able to sort of, you can directly reach out via Twitter or email, or bump into the person who's responsible for the environmental ministry. Your MHK can vote on something one day and explain the decision on the phone to you the next. At least as a local councillor, for example, I can bump into my members of my community down the road, and on nights out I'll have to explain why I made a decision to change recycling policy, right? I mean, it's quite nice to be able to have that direct day-to-day interface, and it's really cool because a representative democracy should be representative of members of your community. Politicians shouldn't be above the people, they should be of the people, and that's something you can really feel in a place like the Isle of Man. At the end of the day, I moved here at 22, and I do feel like the Isle of Man has given me absolutely everything. I mean, for the first time, I ended up living in a community where I felt that I was really part of a community, walking down the road and being able to bump into people that you know. You've got an amazing social life over here. Everyone is really lovely and welcoming. And I feel an immense amount of gratitude to the Isle of Man and its people. And particularly when you look at like youth culture on the Isle of Man, it's immensely creative. If you live in a big city like Liverpool or Manchester or London, there's loads of things you can do, and you can differentiate yourself through consumption. Whereas I feel like people over here, we've got a lot of local live music that is absolutely superb and incredible. Loads of people engage in art on a day-to-day basis. And as a result, people have to be a lot more creative than you would expect for a place of this size. So youth culture on the Isle of Man is something that is unique, that probably does need like a lot more exposure, that is an amazing thing to be a part of. And at the end of the day, I really care about that, and I think it's one of the best things about the island, and it's something that I don't want to see go away. And every talented person that you lose from the island is a loss to that culture. It's something that is really deeply felt. Every time a musician or an artist goes, it's heartbreaking. Every time a friend goes, it's heartbreaking. And I just don't want to have any more leaving dues, and I prefer to go to weddings.